Hi, I'm Thomas Pesquet. Join me on France 24 and RFI for the entire duration of my next trip called Mission Alpha. Discover life on board the space station, scientific experiments, and other moments I'll be sharing with you while away from Earth for 6 months.
Follow Thomas Pesquet on board the International Space Station on France 24 and RFI.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this live. I'm Ketavan Gorjastani. I'm the France 24 correspondent in Washington, but right now I am in Cape Canaveral at the Kennedy Space Center, where I'm actually sitting in the press room of this Kennedy Space Center. We're awaiting, of course, that big launch, which is now planned for tomorrow morning, Friday morning at 5:49 a.m. That's because it has been delayed. It was supposed to take place actually this morning, earlier today at 6:11 a.m. local time this Thursday morning, but that launch was delayed because of bad weather, not necessarily bad weather here on Cape Canaveral, but bad weather on the recovery area, because you have to remember that what SpaceX is launching tomorrow is the rocket where two parts are actually being reused. The first stage, the first part of the Falcon 9 rocket, which will be reused for future launches, and of course that Dragon capsule. This is where those astronauts will be sitting, and that will also be possibly, if anything goes wrong, that capsule could have to be ejected, and so you need to have really good weather conditions over the ocean. So this is why the launch is taking place tomorrow on Friday morning. So we are here at the Kennedy Space Center to cover all the big events. We've been talking to some specialists, people who know the Kennedy Space Center, who know SpaceX, who know these astronauts. So we're going to be sharing all of this on all our platforms, on France 24, France24.com, on all our social media platforms, our sister radio station, RFI, of course, and all across our different languages. So if you have any questions, please join us and send me one of your questions. I'll try my best to answer and to tell you what is exactly going on here at the Kennedy Space Center, what we're waiting for, what's the atmosphere like here. So as I said, you can share with us your comments, your questions, anything you want to know about Thomas Pesquet, which is, of course, the Frenchman of this Crew 2 mission heading to the International Space Station. So, of course, a lot of pride for the French, for France 24. He's actually the first European who will be flying off on a SpaceX mission, Thomas Pesquet. It's going to be his second trip to the International Space Station, but the first time with SpaceX. It's actually the first time with SpaceX for all of the crew members. Remember who they are: Thomas Pesquet, of course, the Frenchman, but also two Americans, Shane Kimbrough and Megan MacArthur, as well as a Japanese astronaut, Aki Oshide. So these are the four members of the crew that will be heading out to the International Space Station. And how they will be heading out there, I started talking about it a little bit. So you have that rocket, the Falcon 9, which will be launching off from pad 39A. 39A, for those of you who know a little bit about space, it's of course a historic launch pad here at the Kennedy Space Center. 39A is the launch pad that sent off many Apollo missions, including Apollo 11, as well as several space shuttle launches. So it's really key in the U.S. space program, and it's really a historic, a very important launch pad here at the Kennedy Space Center. And so that's where that rocket is already standing there. We actually were lucky enough yesterday with the rest of my teammates to go to that launch pad, get a little bit close. Of course, you're still pretty far away. There's a barrier there. They're really protecting that site ahead of the launch. But we got to get a little bit close to that and to see how big it is. It actually culminates at about 70 meters up in the air. And you have, of course, at the top of that rocket, that capsule, which looks a little bit like a sort of a triangle, and that sits at the top of that rocket, and that is where these 4 astronauts will be sitting when they are launched into space. It's the Dragon capsule. They'll be sitting, the 4 of them, in that capsule to take that flight to the International Space Station. They will be arriving and docking at the International Space Station about 24 hours after the launch. That's what we're expecting, if all goes well, for them to be so kind of knocking on the door of the International Space Station. That will be on Saturday morning, early in the morning of Saturday. So that will be their trip. And the capsule, of course, is something that is very important because, first of all, it's going to the International Space Station. It's actually the capsule that was used in the Demo 2 flight, the launch of Demo 2. That was the certification flight for SpaceX for that Dragon capsule, to really validate the fact that it is safe. It can go to the International Space Station. And so it is the same capsule that was used back in that Demo 2 flight, which was, if I'm not mistaken, back in May of 2020. And the funny story there is that the husband of Megan MacArthur was actually on that Demo 2 flight. And she will actually be sitting in exactly the same seat as her husband was on that Demo 2. So this is for the little story behind the big story of the SpaceX launch for Megan MacArthur. If you're joining us, please share any comments or any questions you may have about this SpaceX launch, which is coming up very soon. We got a little bit of a delay, 24 hours to really get going. And it actually helped us out a lot for us journalists, because we got to talk to a lot of experts, people who were interested to share their stories and to share what is the importance of this launch. We have the first question, Samuel Souni, who is asking, what is Mission Alpha? Because you probably saw that there is the Crew 2 mission, and then there is a lot of talk, of course, about Mission Alpha, especially a lot of talk about Mission Alpha in France, because Mission Alpha is actually the specific mission that Thomas Pesquet is going on. The Crew 2 mission is basically the launch and the travel to the International Space Station. But Thomas Pesquet's job, once he gets there in the International Space Station, he's going to be there for about 6 months, and he will be doing plenty of experiments during this time in the International Space Station. And his mission is called Mission Alpha. And among those experiments, he's going to be doing a lot of scientific experiments, because that is really the goal. A lot of people who don't really know about space think, they just send people up in space, and then what do they really do while they're there? So a big chunk of what they're going to be doing there, especially Thomas Pesquet, is to really do these scientific experiments. They're medical experiments. They're more technological experiments. They're also doing research on how the cells, especially brain cells, how they deal, how they age during this space travel, how they age, also how they react to radiation, because there's a lot of radiation when you're out into space in the International Space Station. So those will be all the part of the experiments that they're going to be doing. And Thomas Pesquet is also going to be researching, and they're all doing that, really, is really seeing how staying in space, living in space, how that impacts the human body. Because this is not just a one-off. You know that the space conquest basically is always pushing further, and There is work now on sending men back to the moon, but for an extended stay on the moon, and then further down the road, possibly one day sending humans to Mars. But for that, they need to be sure that the human body can actually take the strain of these extended periods of time out in space. And so these four crew members, they're going to be there for about 4 months. And Thomas Pesquet, for example, for 6 months. And Thomas Pesquet is going to be doing a lot of training also. And they're going to be looking at, when he comes back, how his body has reacted, because 6 months in space is long, but it's also very short if you compare to what could be needed if you're going to Mars. That could be way longer. And so they really need to find out how the body reacts while it is there, how the mental state of these astronauts is doing throughout these 6 months, and how they do when they come back. So scientific experiments, and research on the body reacting to those extended periods of stay in space. And of course, some work for the media and for public relations, basically getting people to know about space. There's always during the day a few hours that are really set aside for all these astronauts to do some interviews, to send some videos. And we're actually partnering with Thomas Pesquet, with the European Space Agency, and you're going to be seeing Thomas Pesquet sending out little videos to talk about his time in space. You'll be seeing them both on France 24 and on our sister radio station, RFI. And I see that there are multiple questions about Mission Alpha. So really, Mission Alpha is what Thomas Pesquet is going to be doing. He's going to have a lot of work to do, and he was talking about those days, those very long days, and they're really busy. I mean, not just Thomas Pesquet; all of them will be extremely busy. They have a very strict and organized schedule. They usually wake up around 6 a.m. GMT. They're really adapted to the GMT timeline. So they wake up around 6 a.m. They have breakfast, and then they start working on all the stuff that they need to do all their work. They have a radio conference with the people back on Earth to discuss all these scientific experiments, what they're doing, what they need to do. And then they have a little bit of a lunch break. And then there's the other part. I talked a lot about the scientific experiments, but there's another main reason why these astronauts, including Thomas Pesquet, are up in the air or up in the International Space Station. That is maintenance, because the ISS is starting to be an old lady, and the ISS needs some maintenance, needs to be checked, because of course all of this International Space Station is a very highly complicated mass, and it needs to have everything checked all the time. So they're going to do a lot of maintenance on the International Space Station, and they're also going to do a lot of upgrades. And one of the things that Thomas Pesquet might be doing is replacing and switching to new solar panels, new huge rollout solar panels that will help bring more energy to the International Space Station. That will also be part of his job. And after that maintenance, they, of course, need to do some physical training, exercise. They have about 2 hours of exercise per day. And that is because, of course, they are in zero gravity. So their muscles are not working at all. So they need to keep their muscles going throughout their 6 months in space. And that is why, if you've seen any returns from space to Earth, you see that often they have to be pulled out of their capsule or their spacecraft, and that they can't really walk without help when they come out of space. And that is because they spend so much time in zero gravity, and that is why they have to do physical training every day for a couple of hours to really keep their body up to date. So this is what they're going to be doing. That's pretty much their day, their schedule. There's also some good times, some fun times when you're out in the International Space Station. Doesn't necessarily happen a lot. Thomas Pesquet was saying in an interview that he last time he was in the International Space Station, he didn't have much time to spend on his own, really, for his free time. And so he was hoping to really enjoy all the little bits and pieces of free time that he can get. They get to once in a while call their families during their stay. And I see that there's a question from Tiana Tahina, who says, how long are they staying there? They're staying there for 6 months. That's usually how long crews at the International Space Station stay. That's the typical rotation. And so during 6 months, you're, closed in. We've seen how that can feel sometimes during this COVID pandemic, being locked into a certain place for 6 months with nowhere to go. So because they're staying there for so long, for 6 months, they get to talk to their families a few times. They also get to take a little bit of good food, because of course most of their meals are really made for space, not always the greatest food you can have around, but they all got to bring a few really chef cooked meals. And of course, Thomas Pesquet, being a Frenchman, he was under extreme pressure to bring some good food up in the International Space Station. And there's a famous French chef, Thierry Marx, who has cooked up several meals for the ISS for Thomas Pesquet to bring with him, to live up to the reputation of French cuisine. So we'll see what those will be. We don't really know what type of meals they're going to have, but that's the idea. There is to get them to have sometimes some nice meals. Another thing that the astronauts bring with them, we don't know exactly what they do, but they often bring a few personal items that can make their stay a little bit more homey. And we have heard that Thomas Pesquet is probably going to bring a French flag, because of course they're staying 6 months up there. So they're going to be up there during the Tokyo Olympics. And so it seems like Thomas Pesquet is getting ready for a few gold medals for the French team. There's also a Japanese astronaut, Haki Oshide. He will be actually the commander during part of these 6 months, and we're expecting that to coincide with those Tokyo Olympics in Japan, because as a nod to these 2021 Olympics with that Japanese astronaut. We have another question. Romain Stevenard, how many will they be at the same time on the International Space Station? Good question. So usually, right now, the situation up in the air in the International Space Station is that you have 4 crew members who actually are the ones who left with Crew 1 with SpaceX, and who will be returning, who will be basically replaced by Crew 2, by Thomas Pesquet, Megan MacArthur, Shane Kimbrough, and Aki Oshide. But right now, those Crew 1, the 4 members of Crew 1, are up in the International Space Station, and they're also there with 3 other astronauts who came with a Soyuz trip. And so at this time, there are 7 of them up there. You're sending 4 more with Crew 2. So when Crew 2 arrives, they will be 11 of them, but they're not going to be 11 of them throughout these 6 months, because of course Crew 1, those 4 other astronauts, will be leaving in about a week's time. They will be returning to Earth. So basically Crew 2 is replacing Crew 1. So we will be back then to 8 astronauts really for the remainder, most of those 6 months. So it's going to be a little bit crowded for about a week when these 11 astronauts will have to live together, because that's not the number that the International Space Station is made for. But they'll figure it out. I'm sure they can deal with spaceships. They can figure out a little bit of a sleeping pattern to fit all these 11 people for just a few days. So when Crew 2 arrives there, the way they arrive is really interesting. And if you're going to be joining us live on all our platform, we're going to try to bring you all the really important events that will be taking place throughout this launch period and throughout the docking period, which will be on Saturday morning, about 24 hours later. And so we'll bring you the moment when those 4 astronauts of Crew 2 will be docking to the International Space Station. And then after a couple of hours, usually after everything is checked and the hatch is opened, they will be entering the International Space Station. And then there is a sort of a welcome ceremony for the new team arriving. There will be, first of all, some of the astronauts will get to send a little message and talk to their families, telling them that they're doing well, that they've arrived. And then they're going to be greeted by the other members who are already in the International Space Station. And then there will be some more formal sort of space press conference where these astronauts will be making a few comments and remarks to mark really their arrival and their installation in the International Space Station. Will they take any animals for research? I'm pretty sure they're not taking any animals, but they are taking some bacteria, some blobs to do some research, but no actual animals, no monkeys, no dogs being taken to the International Space Station. Simon says, what is it like to be in the Kennedy Space Center? It's actually pretty amazing when you arrive at the Kennedy Space Center. You arrive to this location, which is, first of all, it is huge. It's very, very big. There are a lot of things happening here, but you enter. First of all, there's a lot of security, so you have to go through checks. You have a badge, you have an escort, and you enter the Kennedy Space Center. And when you arrive there, the first thing you see is the VAB, which is the Vehicle Assembly Building. It's a huge building. It's 160 meters high, but it's also very, very wide. And it's sort of like a garage for building rockets, basically, if you really summarize it. And so that is the thing that you see when you first arrive. There's a huge US flag painted on one of the walls of that building. And there is also the NASA sign, and that's where they have built in the past several rockets, and they will be building some more in the future. So that's the big building that you see when you arrive. Our press center is actually just across from the VAB, so that's where we're sitting. We get to see this VAB every time we go in and out of the press center. And as you walk through and you go a little bit further, you see they put a sort of a replica of the Dragon capsule next to the press center, which is actually pretty cool because you get to see it as a journalist and see the size of that capsule. It's actually not that big. It's about 9 cubic meters, but you imagine these 4 astronauts sitting in there for about 24 hours as they go into the International Space Station. And I expected it actually to look bigger than it actually was. And then if you look across the water, there is in the background, a little bit far away for the eye and for the cameras to see from the press center, but you can see in the background the Falcon 9 with the real Dragon capsule at the top on that launch pad 39A. And so the atmosphere here is really one of history. You feel, you think to all the missions in the past that have taken off from the Kennedy Space Center, the Apollos, the space shuttle, and all this historic space program from the United States. And it's also interesting and nice to see NASA also, and the people here, the Americans here, talk about how proud they are that the space program is actually picking up again after pretty much a decade where there were no space launches here on the Kennedy Space Center, because it had kind of stopped for the human launches that were going out into space. So for 10 years, they were not sending astronauts from U.S. soil, and now they're back. They started again in 2020, and we were talking to one NASA commentator who really said that this was, at some point during this 10 years, they felt a little bit like maybe they were losing hope, that there was something that was slowly dying down, but that they always felt that one day it would pick up. And they feel like with SpaceX and this partnership with the European Space Agency, the Japanese Space Agency, they all came back, and they're bringing back international partners, international media, and people are getting more and more interested in what is going on in space. And so the U.S. space program, the historic U.S. space program, is somehow picking up again with thanks to SpaceX. Samuel Soumni, what is the actual agenda of this mission? Well, it is partly, as I was talking about, the scientific experiments, which is really the core of their mission, is to carry out all these experiments, some of them that are very specific, others that could have implications for us living back here on Earth. There's also a lot of research, as I was saying, about how the body adapts to staying in space for long periods of time. That, of course, looking ahead to going back to the moon, and then going possibly one day to sending people to Mars. And there's also that part that I talked about earlier when I was talking about the solar panels that Thomas Pesquet might be going out to install. That's part of the maintenance, because it is very important for these astronauts. They're also there to really check everything and do some maintenance on the issues that they may have found at the International Space Station, so that this International Space Station, that is already pretty old for this type of big, complex element, but they want to try to keep, and it's now been certified until 2028, and they're hoping to keep it really up to date and try to do these improvements, this maintenance, so that there is no real issue, and that it can live on for a few years longer than it was initially planned for. So this is going to wrap up our live here. This space launch is set to happen, if all goes well, this Friday morning, 5:49 a.m. local time here in Cape Canaveral. That's 11:49 a.m. Paris time for those of you who are on European or close to European time. We will be, of course, covering all of it on all our channels, all our platforms, France24, France24.com, all our social media platforms, and our sister radio station, RFI. Will be bringing you all these events, the lead up to the launch itself, and everything that happens after that, all the way to the docking at the International Space Station. We'll have experts, we'll have people coming on live to talk about what is going on, people who know some of the astronauts, especially Thomas Pesquet. And you can also catch up if you haven't seen it yet. You can go and check out our exclusive interview, France 24 and RFI interviewing Thomas Pesquet before this space launch. He talked about a lot of things about what it's like to go out into space, what he's hoping to achieve there. Really interesting. So check all of this out. And of course, join us tomorrow morning to cover the big Crew 2 mission launch to the International Space Station.
Special event.
Hi, I'm Thomas Pesquet. Join me on France 24 and RFI for the entire duration of my next trip called Mission Alpha. Discover life on board the space station, scientific experiments, and other moments I will be sharing with you while away from Earth for 6 months.
Follow Thomas Pesquet on board the International Space Station on France 24 and RFI.